I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. Just an FYI that Director Jacobs is out of town, but he has joined us remotely. So we have a full complement of folks. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting. So moved.
I would like to amend the agenda for today.
All right, there's a motion to amend the agenda for today's meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Great.
I'm opposed right at the moment to amending the agenda to vote on the budget. And without getting into the budget discussion deeply, let me explain why.
Frank, let's do this. Let's talk about your acknowledgement is known, okay? I don't want to talk about what's going to be done. All we're focusing on is whether or not the amendment should be agended.
I'm opposed.
Should be amended, excuse me.
I'm opposed because of a very specific component in the budget.
All right, so noted. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of amending the agenda for today's meeting? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
2. Any abstentions? Steve, how did you vote?
Aye.
Steve, you're muted.
No, I thought I unmuted.
Steve, you're still muted.
It's muted.
You're muted.
Aye.
Steve, raise your hand if you voted yes. All right, he did. All right. All right, so the agenda will be amended, the amendment.
I move to add to new business approval of the fiscal year budget 2023, 2024.
All right, and we've got the information in front of us. All right, that item will be added to new business. Sir. All right, next item on the agenda, the approval of the minutes from the January 21st regular meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve said minutes.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the regular meeting on January 21st, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, please record the vote as unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the February 7th special meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the February 7th special meeting, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Record unanimous. Next item of business, President's remarks, just one. I am so glad to see the yacht club open again. I was reported to me that Thursday and Friday they had a very good crowd. And I hope that, and I'm very confident that that will continue throughout the season. So kudos to everybody who started the season off right. Let's hope we keep it going that way and we will move on. Next item on the agenda is the GM report. John.
Thank you, Doug. And to continue on what Doug just said about the yacht club, let's talk about the grill. And last Sunday was Super Bowl, as we all know. This place was rocking. There was 150 people here. Great time. So a couple pictures there, people having a good time. And good time by all. Turn page. All right, so the initiatives, what we're going to talk about today is all listed here. Pretty consistent with what how I followed each time. So let's get into it this week. I'm going to start off with headwinds, tailwinds. A slide you've certainly seen every month in what I talk on. So here that talked about in the past as a headwind. Reason I didn't put it as headwind, I'm not going to say it's a headwind, but we all need to understand. We value safety. We all certainly value it in Ocean Pines, the surveys and everything else. I do. I appreciate the fire, the EMS, the police department. I know we all do pretty much, but there is a cost to that. If you've been reading the papers or you've been listening to WBOC or whatever, the municipalities around us, they're all increasing what they pay, what they give bonuses for the police, what they're doing for pensions. We are looking at that. We need to be competitive. We value these individuals. Inflation, well, there's not enough, I've been saying this, so there's not much more here, but inflation certainly came into this budget and is out there. Hopefully it is starting to turn. That's a nationwide, not just a local. Minimum wage, well, that's statutory, and we have that built into this budget. And that's one of the reasons why you see an increase in payroll. That's statutory, that's everywhere. We do have to increase what we're paying there. We want to keep the pools open, so we're gonna have to raise our wages or try to get whatever population of lifeguards are out there. The task is to get those pools open. That's what it's going to take. We built the budget on that. Mark to market, well, we have competition out there. We have a lot of good, strong employees, witnessed by the results, and we certainly have to be competitive, all built into the budget. Well, kind of goes hand in hand with that. What I want to say here is this is the first time that I could really say over the last year and a half, we're seeing people come in. We're getting resumes for the labor positions that we've spoken about that are open in Public Works. We actually just hired, 2 or 3 lifeguards. We're in the process. We hired 2 lifeguards in the process of hiring the 3rd one. That would put us pretty much level for the winter time. But we certainly need a lot more in that pool for the pool for the summer. We have that the same thing with the police. Insurance premiums, it's no secret, even in your private lives, your personal lives, the insurance premiums keep going up. It certainly affects us here. The tailwinds, well, I continue to say it. Well, let me just go back on the other one. Again, I don't call this a headwind, but it certainly is going to affect the budget. It will affect it in the future. If you've gone like I do to the majority or all the committee meetings or try to keep up with them, the committees are asking for more. That will have an effect on the budget to determine, after we determine what exactly we're looking for. Tailwinds, I have to say it, it's our team. Turn the page, and our amenities. We have excellent amenities. All right, so next page, what are we doing to fill the positions? Well, it's all there. So I mentioned that, but we have had 5 inquiries, so that's a good sign. We are following up on that. Back at sports manager, I know Debbie Donahue just spent a couple days interviewing. She certainly had a lot of resumes for that position, so we are feeling good there. Aquatics, like I mentioned, we hired 2 lifeguards, but it's all there for you to all to see. Public Works, 3 openings. Look how many inquiries that were there. So we are looking online. We're doing a lot of different things that I've mentioned in other board meetings on what we're doing to hire people. We are going to have a job fair on March 11th from 9 to 12 p.m. In addition to that, Director Lackinick just came to me, asked if we've been doing a job fair, or we're looking to do one at Stephen Decatur, and we will put that on the agenda. I will talk to them.
And we also have been advertising the Stephen Decatur job board. That has been advertised as well.
Okay, so next slide. Again, what I'm trying to show here is all the maintenance, the work we're doing throughout Ocean Pines this week. You know, there were some inquiries. I got some emails on the basketball courts a couple of weeks ago about lighting at nighttime, or what we're doing. So here you can see our team in place there on the left. They are installing new LED lights. Here's the cost. But you can see, and I've heard some positive things as far as lighting out there, as our team at Public Works continue to update our bulbs or lights with LED throughout Ocean Pines. Page. Administration building renovation, well, this is a big one. And I've been talking about this, and certainly we've had favorability in maintenance. And I've said that, you know, that's timing. By the time we start that for the administration building, the maintenance part of this renovation was over $40,000. So you will see that starting to hit when I talk about the numbers in maintenance. But here's the major areas that we tackled in that building. And as Eddie Wells has said to me, John, it's long overdue. So HVAC and plumbing, we used outside contractors, our preferred vendors, which we've been using, and we've had success with them. The design, the painting, the restrooms, these are all outside contractors, and the floors. The floor person is new, but the other 2 is certainly a go-to people that we've been using for years, certainly since I've been here. Public Works definitely had a maintenance team up there. At any given time, I saw 3, 4, 5 people from our team. They did a lot of work on the ceiling tiles, some construction of walls and some other stuff. So you can also see, I believe that's the ladies' restroom there in the middle. the new HVAC systems. I've never seen before this, I've never seen a building where you just could not regulate the air conditioner or heating. This will certainly help now. So it's not just maintenance. We're certainly moving to where that building should be. Okay, good. Perfect. Our club maintenance, again, focusing on maintenance. Brought up that, the left side, it was rusty, obviously you're near the water. We brought an outside contractor in, $3,100 for the painting. We also, and I've talked about this before, the whole upstairs was painted. It needed a lot of work, not just painting, but the walls and the ceilings needed a lot of prep work. That's all been done. I spoke to Matt, Lear, they're all happy with it. And we continue to do other maintenance up there, whether it's the drapes and other stuff, we're all working on it. On the page. Okay, we talked about this before, but March 7th coming up quick. I'm very excited about this. I know everybody is. We're bringing in some young talent, somebody that's homegrown. I can't say enough about this gentleman. Certainly the information's there. I can tell you this. I'm hearing Ruggieri Golf. I'm hearing already people are signing up for it. I'm also hearing people from other places and other golf courses are signing up. I know I'm going to be signed up on that also. So pretty excited about that. And that's coming up on 7th. When he is here, we'll have a meet and greet. Bob Beckelman, I'd love to be there myself so that he can introduce him to all the golfers, but he certainly comes well advertised, homegrown. Okay, so I just want to add something right here, and Dave has come in, and I'm glad he's here. I'm just going to ask that Dave wants to talk to you a little bit about grants and bonds and what he's doing to show that he continues to try to get funding. Good.
Good morning. Dave Van Gaspar, President of Ocean Plains Fire Department. Just as a refresher, last year, Senator Carrozza and Delegate Hardman worked really hard to get us a PAYGO grant to the tune of $1.35 million. I submitted 2 bond issues last year, which they both supported. We got another $100,000 from the House, another $150,000 from the Senate. This year, I was able to, after talking with Delegate Hardman, to submit another one, and I just recently submitted another bond initiative. Now, on the bond initiative, I submitted it for $1.5 million. We all know that's not going to happen. However, I did submit it for that point, and maybe we'll get 100, maybe we'll get 200,000, and that's pretty much it at this point in time. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that, Dave, right, we hired somebody to do the writings for us on the bonds and the grants.
No, I did.
You did it, but we've also hired somebody to come in also.
We have, if we found anything that was, I'm sorry. We do have somebody who can write for us if we do find something that's available. The only other thing going on right now is SAFER grant. We cannot apply, and we've talked about this in the past. We can't apply for a SAFER grant because SAFER grant is good for manpower only, and it's good for only 3 years. After 3 years, this board has to commit right now to continue funding after 3 years. And that was determined to be not practical.
Dave, quick question. The bond that you submitted, when's the date for decision?
This is, I think, this is the fourth week of the legislature. Fifth week, I'm sorry, fifth legislature. So it'll be within the next couple of weeks. I'm waiting for step 2. Step 2 is they send me, they're doing things different this year, and they're sending me a request for justification. I've already got that written. And so I submitted the application. That goes from Delegate Hardman to the bond committee, whoever that is. If they approve that, then it comes back to me for the justification. Then it's submitted and goes to the legislature. So that's where we are.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so next up, our assistant, Lynn Martin, is going to talk about metrics dashboards.
Okay, CPI violations, we initiated 27 in the month of January, closed out 26, leaving 129 still remaining. The 129.57 are illegal, and 7 of them do have court dates scheduled for March 15, 2023. I did talk to the attorney yesterday, and we do have a schedule. He's going to get affidavits out for an additional 20 in April. Work orders. 31 work orders were initiated in January. The majority were in drainage. We still have drainage open, 50 open, but we did close out 52 work orders in January. Customer service did 109 emails and phone calls in the month of January. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, info@Ocean Pines or dial 410-641-7717.
Okay. Catch up. Thank you, Linda. All right, financials. Take a little different approach today than what I do normally in the months, but again, adhering with our resolutions and our laws on how to present financials. So the financials for the month of January, we continue to show favorability. It's 43,000 favorable in revenue and in expenses. So it's both, and I want to talk a little bit more at the end of this on that. So we are still trending favorable. Keep in mind what I mentioned about the renovation and all that. A lot of those bills will be in February, as well as some other for the police department. So I'm anticipating in February a lot more bills. All right, but we're favorable. Turn the page. All right, so then year to date, that's the number, and that's the number I'm going to talk to. It's the bigger picture here. So continue to show favorability, and I know there's a lot of talk about this favorability, and I am going to address a couple points on that today, right after this slide. Little different approach as I try to explain this, put it in perspective. I know this is a new, I don't know, something new in Ocean Pines after 50 years, but I'll continue to explain it. So we are $1.1 million. I just want to point out a couple things. When we started the budget process in September, we did a forecast bottoms up with our team, and they were estimating around 800, 850 as the favorability. Obviously now, and I did say back then that I was estimating about 1.1, and Steve was with me on that, but we all seem to be trending around $1 million. Again, realized as far as I see it in every other municipality down here that I'm checking and anywhere else in accounting, once you close out your year and you bring in your auditors to certify your results, that's when, to me, it's realized, that's when you utilize this favorability. Everybody else that I'm looking at, we brought in a young man from another municipality right down here, and that's how they did it the one year that they had favorability. That's the way to do it. If you want to change it, so be it, but that's the approach that I've taken, and I'm going to show you what we've done over the last several years, that this is not building up. So it's $1.1 million page. Okay, so I slid this one in there. I don't know how clear it is for everybody. Hopefully online it is. This is the cover page of our controller's report that's issued monthly. I've certainly seen this since I've been down here 15, 18 years ago, and especially in the beginning when I tried to figure out what exactly was going on when I sat in the back seats at board meetings. But here's what I want to point out here on the $1.1 million to try to diffuse some of the myths out there. When you look right there, we have a positive year-to-date operating fund variance of $1.079 million, right? And that's tied to everything else, which I am tasked to do by our resolutions and how to present. The revenues are over budget by, I can't read it up there, but it's over $946,000. Would help if I had the right in front of me. $946,618. Our expenses are under budget $1.032 million. So when you look at that favorability of $1.1 million, let me put it in perspective for you. 950 or 90% of it is revenue growth. Okay, so yeah, we have some positions open, we put it in there so that we'd have favorability. Now, there's where your favorability is coming. That's where our favorability has come since I've been here. It's organic growth. Each year we've taken the budget and we've budgeted higher each year for each amenity. We continue to increase. So when you have favorability this year, it's also on a higher base with the revenue than the prior years. That's a big one. I hope if anybody doesn't, or they want me to expand on that, I certainly will after the meeting. That's big, at least it is for me. When you talk about the expenses, well, there's a mix there. And of course, there are job positions that are open, which I've been talking about, but they're positions that have always been there. It's not like we added those positions now or over the last 3 or 4 years, which we have this favorability. Those positions were there in the past. So I'm not totally sure when they say, well, you're adding positions. If anything, in Public Works, we took out 3 FTEs 3 or 4 years ago. we didn't fund them. So we have taken FTEs out of the budget for public works. We just can't find the labor. But it's coming now. It's coming now, and hopefully we are. In the meantime, we have utilized outside contractors, and quite honestly, it may be the way to continue going, per me. The other thing on the job openings, I've heard in the police, well, you have these openings in police. Well, if a bus pulls up with applicants or whatever, they're certainly qualified, we would hire them. And we are working, we have getting, as I mentioned earlier, inquiries there. And we're trying whatever. So I do have the favorability, but there's a mix to it in the police. I, we, us. You have the favorability in payroll. Everybody's like, oh, look, there's your fate. That's why. That favorability for payroll is offset by the overtime needed to cover everything. So yes, a person that an open position, we have the payroll favorability, but we're paying overtime. That's eating into it. Where the favorability comes up or where the plus comes out is on the medical. We're seeing on the medical, obviously, that, because they're working overtime, we're not paying the medical on the open positions. So that's a big one. That's where it's showing you on your position. So a lot of good stuff here. It's the same thing in public works, but we are utilizing outside contractors. We are getting more done than I ever saw in the 15 years when I used to sit in those back seats trying to figure out what's going on. That's your board. That's your team. That's Ocean Pines. That's where we're at. All right. A little different this week. Turn the page. Okay, so that's the favorability by month, in the month, by department, by amenities, the best we can do. Now, here's the other thing, and it's Steve, our controller, who's back crunching numbers for us to get all the updated schedules for the changes. But Steve pointed out to me the other day in the meeting when I said to him, it's open positions. Think about this place. All our revenue, all our operations are in the beginning, right? I've said this for years. It's in the beginning of the year. So that's where the bulk of our revenue is and our expenses. But the rest of the year, we keep our amenities open. We still have to run the place. We still have to maintain the place. So when I'm looking at numbers, and I've said this numerous times, right? We hemorrhage cash or we utilize cash. We utilize, we have some expenses and we have had favorability in expenses because we have, we look at our expenses and we drill down on everything. So you're going to see in the explanations in the month, it's going to come out more with the jobs being open or the medical. All right. But when you go to the year to date, turn the page. I don't know. So what do you see on the next page? I think. So he might not have updated the bottom there a little bit, but it still ties in. If you look at all these numbers, the public works, the golf operations and maintenance, I'm going to go right down and I'm going to read to you the explanations and the summaries that we do, but it's basically all revenues. In the public works, obviously, and I've talked about the maintenance where there's probably going to be $40,000, $60,000 more is going to hit in February. So that's going to cut down at that, but it's not just that 241. We do have revenue. We've seen revenue. We've gotten increased revenue from the county for roads. We've seen that. We have cut expenses in service and supplies, and like I mentioned, the maintenance, and we do have those open positions in there. But if you look at the contract and the other items in our reserves, that's where we're doing work. It happens to be charged to there. We're using outside contractors. So if you look at the entire picture with public works, it kind of balances out. Golf ops and maintenance, it's all revenues, baby. It's all organic revenue. Okay, if anything, this board, or hopefully today we get an approval, 1 FTE to increase in all of Ocean Pines is what we put forward in the budget. Hopefully I get that for maintenance. We certainly need it. But that's all revenue. The aquatics is revenue I have here, but there is some wages, obviously, but then there's lost revenue because we didn't have the instructors or the lifeguards, and we did have to close. We did put in this budget an increase in salaries to try to get any lifeguards that are out there. So you do see when you look at aquatics, because I'm getting a lot of emails on that one. Probably got 5 of them this week. Just focus on that in the budget. So 5 emails on the aquatics. Good questions. All coming from the same person. But they're good questions. What happened is we're putting the money in. You want us, you want me to try to keep the pools open. We're trying to get them. If we don't get those lifeguards because they're not there, well, then, yeah, I'm going to have favorability. That's the approach we took. And I think that's the way we're going to be going. The police, I talked about the police, also in there. It's no secret that I am going to have to, the county is probably, that bill's not in there yet. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe we could have accrued a little bit there, but I will have something there that will lead into that favorability. All right, it goes right down pretty much. It's all revenue, the marina, the beach club, racket sports is coming along. Beach parking is beach parking. It's pretty much revenue to finance. There's some, all different mixes. So that's it. The bulk of it is revenue. Turn the page. I always like to put this in there, kind of gives you a scorecard. It's about our reserves. It is unaudited. It brings in the contributions, the casino funds, what we're transferring for the spend. And then Steve, we usually show, what we're going to forecast for the rest of the year, where the spend is and what we're going to do. Turn the page. Okay, so here's the forecast of where we're at and what we're going to spend and where we'll be at the end. You can see our reserves are showing healthy. It's not like we're draining them or anything. And I know that's another question that I want to demyth right now, or at least try to explain. So I know I don't have the slide up there, but I did present it in the town hall. And this is something that I have done, something in other lives that I've always done. But this brings it all perspective. P&Ls show you a point in time. They show you for the year. I just got to watch my time. But here's what it is. The assessment came down last year $100. But that assessment had the revenue growth, it had the expense reductions, but it also blended in. We blended in the favorability that was realized, and I explained that to all of you, from the prior year. It's in there. It's just, once it's realized, then we use it. We've been doing this for 2 years. We've also used that favorability in the past to offset the operating deficit, which we inherited. Also, new capital. And I'm going to read just some of the things, where your money went, where our money went over the last 2 years, specifically in fiscal year 23. Well, the one-time assessment, we utilized favorability from the prior year of $650,000 built into the budget that I'm in now. We used $350,000 to, I don't even want to say replenish a road reserve, but to increase the road reserve. A road reserve, which I was tasked to do, I being the GM, by B&F, I guess by the board, to get up to $1 million balance. That's a decision that was made, but that's where your money is going, our money's going. We moved in $700,000 of favorability into that reserve. So where's your favorability? $700,000 of it is in that reserve, all right? $60,000 for the T-Docks. We all know about that. That was new capital. That's how we funded it. With surplus. Transfers to capital replacement for court renovations, $75,000. Racket sports, we infused a lot of money. Constructive board, team, everything. And it was certainly needed. What I saw down there 4 years ago. So in addition to the new pickleball courts, we renovated all those other courts, and I watched them over 5-6 years. That cost $75,000. And through the budget, but paid for not initially with an increase in your assessment, utilizing what? The surplus that we had in the past. We also transferred a new cap fund for mailbox pedestals. We all know about that. $150,000, right? And they were bad. And yeah, it irked me at the post office, whatever with that. But $150,000 that we're fixing with the surplus reserves. That's $1.6 million that we utilized from the past. So now we have, and we're hearing, okay, with surplus. So in this budget right now, this proposed budget, hopefully it's discussed today, we utilized $650,000 from last year. So it was realized, it was there. $100,000 went to drainage. We've spent unprecedented money on drainage. We've put that in the budget. So that kept the assessment from going up. It's new spend. It's additional spend that I never saw before on top of other additional spend. But that's where your money went, our money went. And we replenished the new capital fund for the kayak launch, $30,000. So if we didn't have that surplus and we utilized it, the assessment would have went up. But that's how we covered it. So yes, there is a surplus right now, but there's other things that could be coming down the road. the surplus from this year, that would be built into next year's budget like we did from the last 2 years. Okay, if anybody has any questions on that, I'll be glad to sit here and talk about it yesterday, but I think I put it in perspective. I just don't want to waste any, I think it was valuable to do it, Doug. All right, that's good.
Thank you, John. Next item on the agenda is the treasurer's report. Monica?
Hi, as of January 2023, the association had approximately 13.9 million in cash. The cash increased 900,000 from the same time last year. Cash decreased 1.2 million from December 2022. We have 11.1 million invested in CDRs. The remaining 2.8 million is in insured sweep, money market, and other operating accounts. We do anticipate with the market interest, realized interest to keep increasing over the coming months.
Thanks, Monica. Any questions for Monica? Seeing none, next order of business, public comments. I will remind everybody, you want to make a public comment, please state your name and address. The floor is now open for public comments.
Good morning, Amy Pack, 109 White Horse Drive. I can't believe I have to make a public statement about the botched August 2022 election and that this item is under new business on the agenda. A 6-month problem is not new business. Since the October 15th quick seating of the new election committee over 4 long months ago, there has been nothing. On October 20th, there was a special meeting regarding an election forensic audit that was supposed to be due December 1st last year. We have heard nothing. On November 3rd, the new very quickly seated election committee met. A chair and a vice chair were elected, and we have heard nothing. There are no minutes of this meeting over 3 months ago on the website. On November 12th, over 3 long months ago, the election committee liaison, Richard Farr, wrote a discussion topic regarding an update, but he did not put it on the November 19th regular board meeting. We have heard nothing. On November 14th, I wrote requesting this election report. I have heard nothing. Apparently, there is a report that was written in November. Another homeowner who has hired a lawyer received it, and it appears to be incomplete. On December 17th, there's a regular board meeting with the now then over 1 month old November 12th discussion form in the meeting packet. But at the last minute, the agenda is amended at the start of the meeting to take this discussion of the report off the agenda. And no report is presented by the chair or the vice chair or the board liaison. This, I guess, secret report is still not on the website. We have heard nothing. On January 21st, once again, there is another regular board meeting. And again, the election report is not on the agenda. I wrote and requested that it be put on there and heard nothing. So this is not under old business. It's not under new business. And again, the election report, the election committee minute meetings, any agenda for any other meetings are not on the website, not on the calendar, and we have heard nothing. So that brings us today. Today, along 6 months after the botched election, we still do not have a new election report on the website. There are still no minutes. There are still no meeting dates. And the packet includes the exact same discussion form from November 12th. Let me repeat that. The agenda today includes the exact same 3-month-old discussion form from November 12th. This is a discussion that should have been presented in November or December or January, but it was not. How is this November 12th discussion form now on the agenda today under new business? Because we have heard nothing. Well, that's not totally true. We have now heard that the vice chair of the election committee will be running for the board of directors. That's great. We have our first candidate, but we do not have an election report, much less an audit. What exactly has the new election committee been doing since October 15th? Have they met more than one time on November 3rd? When? Where are those minutes? What exactly happened at it's not a secret meeting because the door was open when the ballots were again reviewed. This absence of transparency and no committee results since October 2022 is troubling, to say the least. How are property owners to have confidence in the next election quickly coming up? Why all the secrecy? Face it, electronic voting was not the problem. I am just asking for the board and the election committee to do their job and to do the promised December 1st audit. I want this fixed. I want it fixed now because it's late and it's very late. Thank you.
Other public comments? Seeing none? No. Go ahead, please. You and
Steve Ransville, 128 Boston Drive. I rise for something that perhaps is small in the big scheme of things, but it's important to many of us. First of all, we participated in trivia night at the Yacht Club. Wonderful venue, wonderful experience, lively group. The board and the Matt Ort team are to be commended for getting us off to such a good start. But as I exited, I noticed a concern that the American flag flagging from the flagpole outside the Yacht Club has become very tattered and is in need of retirement and replacement. And as part of that, I'd ask that we check all of our outdoor flags, particularly to do that replacement, as we do have many veterans and active duty servicemen and women in the community and many other patriots who are here. And we would appreciate keeping that flag flying high and in perfect condition. Thank you.
John, noted.
Yeah, it's duly noted. We'll do it.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Hello, I'm Jack Levering, 6 Sweeping Minute Court. And I'm here to represent the little furry animals at the dog park, just to bring it before the board, asking your support. I've written a note to Debbie Donahue, the Parks and Rec, and one to Mr. Viola with some simple requests that we've asked for the dog park. We don't ask much, and we're a low budget amenity in the park. So we feel we serve a good purpose. We've asked for an agility course, and I think Debbie's going to consider that and maybe put that in the budget this year. I hope it's there. Last year, we didn't get our mulch in until much later in the spring. And if you ride down through the racquetball center or the softball field, you see what a muddy mess that dog park is. And our dogs come in and play, and they're a mess when they leave, and we have to clean them up, and they get the cars dirty and so forth. So some help would be requested to get that mulch in as soon as we could, please. The walkway into the dog park is just mud and grass. We need some gravel maybe in there from the parking lot just to transition into the dog park entrance would be a big help. We try to hopscotch around and not get our feet too muddy going in and out. The hanger boards for the tools, we need rakes sometime and a shovel to help manicure the dog park. Those boards have now deteriorated to such a point they're rotten and you can't hang a tool on it at all. So those simple requests are asked maybe, and the board support would be appreciated. It's not a big budget item, I don't believe. We get the mulch every year. The agility course maybe would run $600 to $700. And the hanger boards maybe are a Parks and Rec, and they're good work to do that. Okay, thank you for the.
Excuse me, Jack. I need to get your address. I didn't hear it.
Jack Levering, 6 Sweeping Minute Court.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Noted.
Thank you, Doug. And yes, sir, I did get the email. I know Debbie and I had a meeting on this when we had the updates. I know about the mulch. We'll try to get it in there earlier. I do believe you also had the toys and the rides, like for the dogs or something, some stuff. You wanted that. Was you the one? Agility boards or whatever they are. I know I talked to her about that. We're going to try to get some of that stuff in there. I didn't realize about the hangers, the boards and the rakes, but that's an easy fix.
Yeah.
Have Public Works do it. The mud, it is tough in there with the trees and all that stuff, but maybe if we get the mulch in there a little earlier, we'll try that.
If we could, the most would be a big help.
Wait,
Earlier, the better.
Yeah, I think the key word there that I got to go back with is earlier.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You got that.
Other public comments? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comments. Move into the next item of business, and that's capital requests. First one is Public Works, the swimming racket pool roof replacement. John?
Okay. I'm going to read the capital request first.
Okay, capital request, Public Works, it's for the swim racket pool, clubhouse, pool and gazebo, requesting authorization to go forward with staff recommendation of 29,200 for roofing.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to authorize the spend for the racket pool roof replacement.
So moved.
There's a second.
Second.
Discussion.
Who seconded?
No, Colette. Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the request for expenses to replace the roof at the Swim and Racket Club, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Record the vote as unanimous. The next item is a capital request for resurfacing courts at the Racket Center. John? Linda?
Okay, capital request for racket sports, resurface the 8 hard true tennis courts, requesting authorization to go forward with staff recommendation of 19,580 for resurfacing the courts.
I will entertain a motion to approve an expense of $19,580 to resurface the tennis courts.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a
Discussion.
question.
Discussion.
Reading those proposals, it looks like you're gonna scrape the surface, clean the surface and add about an inch of material.
It's exactly what we've been doing every year and exactly what's needed for those type of courts.
And how often do you have to address the sub base underneath? When's the last time that was addressed?
I don't know. Nobody, I've never heard that one before. I have talked about it on hard courts, sub base for that. What exactly, where is it like?
Well, I've heard from, as liaison to
Yes.
I've heard from individual members that the sub base needs to be replaced some number of years. I think it's 10, 15, 20 years. I'm not sure. And to the knowledge of the current members of the committee, that has not been done in the past 20 years.
Oh, this is the first time that I am hearing that. I will, when ATC, when they come in for this, we will talk to them.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
Other discussion?
got that one.
Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the expense of $19,580 to do the resurfacing of the tennis courts, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Or the vote is unanimous. That takes care of the capital request item for our agenda. The next item on the agenda is CPI violations, and none have been reported since our last meeting. Therefore, the next item of business is unfinished business, and we have no unfinished business from our previous meeting. So we can move into new business. First item of new business, election committee update. Rick.
Yes, topic to receive an update from the election committee chair, Tom Piotti, regarding the status of voting systems as a recommendation. Concise statement, consideration should be given to have the election committee continue their current work and recommendation solution for the next election cycle. Background is to investigate and provide findings to the glitches in the, to finish on the background, to investigate and provide findings to the glitches in the voting scan system, tabulations of votes from the last election, make recommendations so the issue will not arise again, and we have an accurate voting tabulation in next election cycle and provide correct results. I'd like to suspend Robert's rules. We have Chair Piotti give an update.
So noted, consider Robert's rules rescinded.
Okay, so you can hear me in the room, I take it?
Yes.
All right. Bottom line up front from the Elections Committee, what you're experiencing right now is why the Elections Committee has concluded we need to abandon online voting. I just want you to know that. Now I'm going to go into my notes here to take you through the process that we've been through. On October 15th, the Elections Committee was appointed. Me, Tom Piatti, as chair. Members George Alston, Elaine Brady, Nancy Osborne, and Tom Schwartz. 2 days later, we got a tasker to look at the scanning process and to determine why there was a 940 vote error. That vote error was actually determined by the previous elections committee, who did a hard count of the ballots and combined the results of Vote HOA online voting. On October 20th, a few days later, the board had a special board meeting and came up with 9 more tasks for us to look at with a 1 December deadline. Now, keep in mind, none of us on this committee had served on the elections committee prior to that. We had to dig in and do a lot of research. The first thing we did was we met with the IT department in the admin building. I guess it's called the Blue Room now. We set up the scanner, we had ballots, and we went through the process. At that time, the IT department told us about some of the potential problems with the scanning equipment. You must understand that the Elections Committee has at least 5 years of historical documents that we have in our possession that are not on any website in Ocean Pines. Whether or not they become property of Ocean Pines and go on the website, we'll talk about that later. But what we did is we went back in time and tried to understand what worked in the past and what wasn't working now. What we determined right up front is that in 2022, we had a 38% participation in voting. It was the lowest in 4 years. We dropped from 42% down to 38%. Okay? Then what we did is we looked at equipment. And in particular, we looked at the ballots, the cards themselves. In 2022, the Elections Committee changed to an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, kind of opaque piece of bond paper, whereas in the past, we had cardstock ballots that fit in a number 9 envelope. What's a number 9 envelope? It's 4 inches by 9 inches. The ballot fit in it. But in this election, that big piece of paper, when you took it out, first of all, you had to fold it 2 times to put it in. Then when you took it out, you had to flatten it to run it through the scanner. Now we understand from talking to IT that the scanner may have been on 2-sided. There was some jamming, and that's why there was a 940 vote error. This was discovered by the previous elections committee, and they rendered their report in October. They actually broke it down by candidate, and you can see the difference. So we took that into consideration. We held multiple work sessions. We went through the file cabinets in the admin building, looked at the ballots, looked at previous ballots, and we also talked to the printing contractor that has been doing this for 20 years. And he pointed out that some of the changes we made were not good. We talked to Snap Survey, which is the vendor for the scanning software. It's called Snap Survey. It's used for surveys. Although it can be used for ballots, it's not good because it's OCR, optical character, not OMR, optical mark reader. And so what we've done is we've looked at 4 other softwares and we've come up with Remark, which is made by a company in Pennsylvania that we've concluded would work for us. But we still have one more thing to do. We have to meet with the IT department. We have to talk about the equipment. We have to talk about new scanning software because somebody's got to approve it. Well, another thing we found out is that prior to 2022, we were using different scanning machines. The Fujitsu that was used in 2021 was slow, so a Xerox scanner was purchased for 2022. Although it was faster, the scanning software kind of was not compatible. On November 14th, we rendered our initial report to the board, trying to get ahead of the December 1st deadline. Keep in mind now that we've got the holidays. We've got people out. People were traveling. I was traveling. People were going to Florida, which it is difficult to get things done during the holidays, but we tried our best. So we rendered that initial report, and we got more questions that we didn't kind of answer why there was a vote count error, although it is in the previous elections committee report, and we talk about it in our November 14th report. So we went back to work, went to the file cabinets again, talked to more people, and on January 19th, we rendered a second written report through our liaison to the board. That thing was specific on addressing Director Daley's question on the ballot count, and I think we answered it. And secondly, Director Horn's question on online voting. And we think we answered that. But during our deliberations, what we found out, because we have all this data, is that the online voting caused more work for the elections committee. And I'll tell you why. At the end of each week, after our contractor collected the envelopes from the post office and from the police department ballot box, he had to run them through a scanner, which produced a report of who submitted envelopes. Now, he didn't open the envelopes. That's not done until after the cutoff for when the envelopes have to be received. That report was electronically transmitted to the second party HOA contractor to run it against who voted online, and it caused two things. Either a report back that someone voted online and they tried to submit a ballot through the ballot system, or they voted online and therefore we shouldn't accept that envelope. The balloting system is interesting. Some people actually took the ballot, copied it on a colored printer, checked it, and put it back in the ballot box, although they voted already. Some of them put religious comments on there. Some of them marked more than one. So those are duplicates or they're invalid and they were set aside. That process of going out to vote HOA electronically out in Oregon happened every week. There is the potential of a problem of spillage of personal data besides a manipulation. That is why this committee has concluded we should not do online voting. We talked to our printing contractor over in Berlin, Mr. Goulas, been doing this for years. He has the capability to produce ballots that fit in a number 9 envelope. He can customize them. We can still have photos on there, and they're easy to slip in. They can be made on a little heavier cardstock, so when you're scanning, there's no opaqueness, and therefore they're read only once. So where are we today? We conclude that we don't want to do online voting. It doesn't work. We don't do it federally. A lot of countries have stopped it, and a lot of states don't do it, period. We need to outsource a lot of this election process. Not that we're going to let someone else do it by themselves, but under the supervision of the elections committee, and I'll tell you why. It provides consistency. Board members are going to change, elections committee members are going to change, and volunteerism is waning in this country. How many millennials do you see at this meeting? So we have one more step, like I said, to talk to John Viola and his IT staff about how we run the scanning process. Do we do a sole source contract to our printing contractor? He buys the software, uses our equipment under our supervision, or do we bring it in-house and let the IT department set it up? Let a contractor run it under our supervision, like had been done in 2020 and 2021. We have the videos of it being done, by the way. They're on YouTube. So that's where we stand right now. And that's pretty much it, except for one statistic I wanted you to know. I think we disenfranchised the multiple property owners. We have 213 multiple property owners for a total of 479 properties. In other words, some people have 2 properties, 3, 4, 5, and up to 6. So therefore, if they vote electronically, the way they voted was weighted against all the properties. If they voted manually, they got 1 vote, unless they came back and asked for envelopes for their other properties. So that didn't work out too well in my view. So that's why we want to go out with an envelope for each property that someone owns. And that concludes my comments. I'm subject to your questions.
Back on, okay. Discussion,
One question.
right?
To Tom. Tom, maybe this is just terminology. By the way, I understand everything you're saying. Do we know the number of lots that voted in the last election?
Please state it again, Tom. Did you hear this, the director's question?
Yes, we do. That's because the electronic, remember, if you voted manually, you only got 1 vote per lot. If you voted electronically, they were weighted. So we do have that answer. And that, and Frank, quite frankly, they was, yeah, Frank to Frank, 940 vote error. I can understand everybody's concern about that. But I think going forward, we can give confidence to the community that by going back to the manual envelopes, that we're not going to have that problem again.
I just think issuing the number of lots that voted would make a lot of the discussion go away. That to me is the break point. And as a matter of fact, that's the whole issue. If the number of votes are under the number of lots that voted, then there's no problem. If the number of votes is above the number of lots that voted, then we need further investigation. And that's why the number of lots is so critical. It's not ballot count, just how many lots voted. And I think everybody sitting up here has been told for years that envelope contains information on the number, the person, and the number of lots that vote. And that makes everything very understandable once we have that count. And then that's one number that I still haven't read out. Now, maybe I missed it, but that's the number that I'd like to see. The number of lots that participated in the election.
We can do that, Frank, but I want to make one more comment for the community. It was interesting for us to learn that some members did not vote for 3 people. They only voted for 1 or 2. And that's kind of interesting. And that was in our statistics in our second report to you. And why? Well, that's their choice. They could vote for 1 person, 2, or cast a vote for 1, 2, or 3 people. And some chose 1 or 2, and then 3.
Good.
He is hearing you through my microphone, actually. They'll running, they'll tell me you're gonna back and forth. He can hear you. Yeah.
So I guess the concern that I have is that before the new election committee was even seated, there was a statement in the property, the website Gazette, that the person who became the chair had already decided that electronic voting would be done away. And I heard nothing in your report that convinced me that there was an analysis of errors due solely to electronic voting, or an analysis of what could be done to improve the efficiency of the electronic voting process, and what could be done, how the use of voting in addition to online voting would enhance the process and the results for our community and the security of our elections for the community. So, I feel like I don't feel satisfied that an analysis of the electronic and / electronic plus phone-in option was adequately evaluated by the committee. And again, what I'm hearing is that the source of errors was in the paper ballot voting. And, you're saying that improvement of the paper and the scanning equipment is going to solve that, and that will take us back to our that paper ballot only levels of voting. But no evidence. He presented me with no convincing evidence that is the case.
I want to recognize Steve Jacobs.
Thank you, Doug. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And frankly, let me start off. I thought Tom's opening comment about squaring electronic voting with the audio problems we had this morning is just disingenuous and improper. But beyond that, let me touch on the electronic voting. The initial point made by Tom was citing the lower participation in the balloting between 2022 and I believe 2021. The figures are indisputable. But then to turn around and say that we should eliminate electronic voting when no problem has been identified with electronic voting would disenfranchise somewhere around 811 ballots and 2,341 votes out of the 8,113 that were cast in 2022. Now, maybe some of them would make use of traditional voting, but not all of them would. The fact of the matter is, folks, we're in the 21st century. Virtually everybody has a computer. Those who don't can still avail themselves of the right to vote traditionally, but those who do have a computer should be allowed to move into the 21st century with all of the appropriate technology that comes to it. Now, that's not to diminish the issue that Tom identified of a potential problem of hacking and loss of confidential data. My best guess would be, one, the data that he's concerned about would be receivable by someone who wanted to hack from any number of sources related to the individual using the computer, not to our system of electronic voting. But the second and most important question is, there's nothing in either of these two reports from the new elections committee that suggests that they talk to either the current vendor or any new vendor who might avail themselves of electronic voting to address those problems. In addition, he cites the problem of no paper trail. But again, there is nothing that suggests any conversation with the current vendor or any other prospective vendors to identify a way to identify any sort of paper trail or check trail, whatever you want to call it, to ensure that electronic voting was as accurate as both election committees state in their respective reports. So we have a potential problem, but no discussion by anyone as to how to solve it with the current vendor or any prospective vendors. So and frankly, the report that was provided in January, as I recall, was again sort of prefaced with a disingenuous comment about why the federal government does not permit electronic voting. Again, that has nothing to do with anything that the Elections Committee was charged with. The problem was on the hard copy voting, not on the electronic voting. And we run the risk of disenfranchising people at a time when, frankly, we should be looking to expand the pool of voters participating in our elections. And we run the risk of further reducing that. It is just counterintuitive in any way you look at it. The other question I have, and I'm a little unclear about this, is this notion of making use of an outside vendor for the purposes of tabulating the votes under the supervision of the Elections Committee. What I'm trying to nail down is whether or not, and I thought I heard Tom say that in the prior elections, they have used Ocean Pines IT staff to run the machine and to tabulate, but before 2022. And that worked pretty well. What I'm a little unclear about is whether or not the concern of either conflict of interest or innate ability to do this work would render the Ocean Pines IT staff as unsuited to tabulate the votes. I'm unclear as to what if we can use our own IT staff, I think that would be beneficial. But I'm unclear as to what it is exactly that Tom is presenting. The last point I want to make, and it was made in the public comment as well. I went back and watched the November 3rd video. I believe it was November 3rd video of the Elections Committee. And I thought their discussion was quite good. It was quite helpful, but it was clearly a surface discussion. I mean, the primary discussion was boiled down to, as I recall, a Google search related to what the software vendor can or shouldn't do in terms of comments from others. Now, the committee may be right. This may not be the appropriate vendor. I don't know. But to sit there and say that returning to pulling the stuff out of file cabinets and a Google search and some additional conversations among the election committee members, none of which, by the way, was open to the public, none of which was ever posted on our website. There was no notice of any of that, all of which is a violation of C-01. It sort of begs the question as to whether or not this constitutes the deep dive that was promised to us. So, and as someone else had pointed out, I believe today, we have another election season coming up, and I'm not convinced that we have answered virtually any of the questions that came up other than the tabulation that was done by the prior Elections Committee and raised the new controversy about trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist with electronic voting. So I'm not clear where we are and what's the next step, but that's my comment.
Other discussion? All right, let me weigh in. So a couple of things. When you're looking at RCA or root cause analysis, one of the things that you go, what was the last time it worked properly? Right, that's the starting point. And then what changed that could have contributed to the results that weren't consistent with what was expected? So one of the ideas that I think I heard, and I hope I'm not misinterpreting or misstating this, but Thomas suggested that two things that I heard. Some of it was from the report, some of it was from what Tom said. There was a problem with, when the ballot changed, this is my understanding, when the ballot changed from a card stock to a paper stock, that there were some questions, some concerns, and some issues with the ability to scan accurately, meaning there were folds in the paper. There was, I believe there was a mention of bleed through if they used a magic marker, those kinds of things, whether it was set to one-sided or two-sided, so on and so forth. There was a number of things that were now introduced that weren't there previously. Okay, so one could argue that because you went to a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. I don't know what pound it, maybe it was a 10-pound, 20-pound page or whatever, that. And since that error had not shown up in the past, that was contributing, in my opinion, to some of the inaccuracies, right? Then you look at online voting. I've heard both sides of it. I know that online voting, from what I understand, was pretty accurate. The one thing I'm still concerned about is the idea of waiting. In other words, multiple property owners, if they cast one vote, how did it get you know what? Forget all that noise, all right? If you have, in my opinion, if you have 6 properties, you get 6 individual ballots, period. There's no waiting, there's no percentages, there's no preconceived notion that you would have done this. Forget it. It's absolute data is what's needed, period. So if the online system can't address that, then it should be tossed, period, right? Go back to root cause analysis. What worked before? Card stock, all right? And I believe I heard Tom say that the picture could be added, which had been done in the past. And 2 things I keyed on. One was that the vendor in these number 9 envelopes would collect the envelopes, I believe, on a weekly basis. That's been done for years. And then scan that in. What that apparently, and Tom, I'm going to ask you, correct me if I'm wrong, is that started this list of who voted. Didn't know how, not who they voted for, but who voted. So there's this reference of the number of people. Frank, to your point, that would be a source of data to say how many lots actually voted. So I believe we can get that. Can we get that from the online software? Perhaps, but I know we can get it from the way we used to do it. All right. And at the end of the day, the scanning issue, remember, going back years and years, we've never had any issue with scanning the ballots when they were on card stock. All right. So my whole point is, while I believe there is room for online voting at some point, I would also offer that it's now February, right? And I see, unless the committee or there's some charge that says we need to move forward and really make this change, I don't see any real problem with going back to a known commodity, which would be the way we did it. Yes, I do hear the argument, and as a retired chief information officer, technology was throughout my career. So, I understand the technology and believe we should promote that going forward. But until we can address those specific issues, I would feel comfortable if we went back to that known commodity of where we got before all of these inconsistencies came to bear. And if that's something we can do, I would ask that we consider doing that. So.
Well, Doug,
And I'll go back to my prior statement that what we asked to have done was not done by this committee. We asked to have an examination of all of the voting options that were used in that election, what source of error there actually was, and if there were sources of error, what are possible solutions? We got nothing, no analysis of the electronic options out there, as Steve pointed out, and no attempt to solve that. And we have a chair of that committee who said before the committee was even formed and before they were even tasked with this deep dive that they didn't do, that he had already concluded that electronic voting should not happen. So I've lost confidence in this committee over this issue. I don't know about you, Frank, it was your motion. I don't feel that what you requested was satisfied. I realize that we are late days, our time is short for getting the next election going. And that's why there was a December due date for this, which was passed. Here we are in February. So I will concede that the next election probably has to be done with the old technology, if you will. But I would say that we really need to look at the composition of this elections committee, make sure we have the right kind of talent on there to do the kind of research that is needed to be done to give electronic voting a fair assessment and to find technology that will work for multiple lot voters as well as single lot voters.
And let me so I'm going to disagree with part of your statement. I do agree with the latter part of the statement where, I heard 2 things. One, we could support going back to the old way of doing it, and we still need to do more homework with regard to introducing or reintroducing electronic voting, knowing what we know now, having done this in the past. What I would disagree with is that, we got a lot of information from that committee. We got information on the scanning, all the information that they got from interacting with the IT committee and so on and so forth. So to paint them as having done nothing, I think is a little disingenuous. We did get some. Did we get everything? No, we did not get everything. I'll agree with that. But hold on, let me finish. Let me finish.
But
Let
we
me
also recall
let me finish, please.
that you told.
No, let me, you're out of order. Please let me finish my statement. Thank you. I will say that we didn't get everything that we had asked for. I will agree with you on that. But to take volunteers who are doing things and say that they're just disingenuous and so on and so forth to me, is not productive. I think we give them a chance. We give them a mandate. And we do know that time is of the essence. I think a decision needs to be made right away. Okay? Now, please.
So I did not say they did nothing. I said they didn't do the full extent of what they were asked to do. They were tasked with doing. And you will recall, Doug, that you told the old election committee that they were not allowed to speak with the technology department.
I did not make that statement.
Answer the same questions answered.
Incorrect, please, but go ahead.
Well, I recall the email in which that was said. And I recall the frustration that with that answer that led to the resignation of the entire elections committee. So I think that's pretty disingenuous to say that this committee did work that the old committee didn't do. Most of their findings are based on what the old committee did.
I never said that they didn't do anything. The old committee did nothing. Okay, please don't put, let's not get into an argument. Just don't put words in my mouth. Don't do that. Okay? It sounds to me like you're saying, because I personally said that they couldn't contact the IT department, caused all of them, to resign. That's just incorrect. Okay? All right, Frank.
Okay, so back to the questions that I asked of the committee and asked to be answered. First, as far as electronic voting, I'm kind of agnostic because I think any kind of voting that we have needs total traceability. And I think you can get total traceability with electronic voting just by saying if you have 6 lots, you get 6 ballots. Period. And if you do that, I guess the question would be, is it traceable? Because if it is traceable at that point in time and that eliminates the waiting, then any problem associated with electronic voting seems to have gone away. I'm more concerned about the fact that we were so far off on a process that we've used for years, which are the paper ballots. And here's where I'm kind of, yeah, we had a problem this election, but somebody did an analysis and said, whoa, you have more votes than you have lots. We've never done that in a past election. So I'm not 100% confident that this problem hasn't been around for a long time. And that hasn't been answered. And the only way to answer that, to me, I guess, just the way I solve problems. Okay, we have a count in August and we had a count in September, right? So I would have hoped to answer some of the questions, run through the scanner, the ballots again that were submitted in August and see what the count is. Now, if you get the same count that you had in August and you have the difference with September, then that tells you one thing. If you run the scan the ballots in August again and get a different count than you got in August, okay, and compare that to what you got in September, it leads you down a slightly different path. And we haven't looked at the past because could this have existed in the past? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know the answer to that. But the whole issue, what we're trying to get at is, the critical thing in an election is every legitimate vote is counted and every legitimate vote is counted properly. And clearly that did not happen in the last election. Okay, so the real question is, what are we going to do in the upcoming election to make sure that? And one thing that I think we should, as a board, and I'm prepared to make the motion, before we vote to certify an election, I want to know how many damn lots voted. And compare that to the votes that were cast. I know people vote for one. Sometimes they vote for two when there's three candidates. That's perfect. If the votes come in under the lots, you're good. Okay? If the votes come in over, you got a problem. Okay? And even if it's one vote, you got a problem. And I'm not, the real thing is, and I ask this for all of us up here because we've all had to campaign, we've all had to run in an election. What would you do if you were within 20 to 30 votes of winning in this upcoming election? I mean, would you demand a recount? Would you stop the certification in court? Because based on the results of the last election, that's probably what should have happened. Because we were clearly way, way off. And that's a problem that we have to face as a board. We cannot, in this upcoming election, certify an election where the potential variance per candidate exceeds 300 votes. It's just a failure on our part, and it's not a small one.
Steve had his hand up, Steve.
Yeah, I just, look, I think,
Okay.
hold on, we okay? Can you hear me? Hello? Are we on?
Yes, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think the prior election committee did what they could do. I think the current election committee has made a good faith effort to continue that work. I'm not going to get into which did more than the other or whatever. Two points, though, that I think are crucial. The initial point that Tom made, which I agree with, and by the way, which was picked up quite a bit in social media at the time of the election, was the drop in voter participation. And it does not make sense. It's counterintuitive by any measure to say where we haven't had a problem, we should close that avenue off, which is really what we're talking about with electronic voting. The issue of the paper stock, the scanner, the machine, I mean, it does appear, based upon what Tom is saying, is we changed machines, we didn't update the software, that created part of the problem, and when we changed the ballot, that created more of a problem. That seems to be all solvable before the next election. The issue of the multiple lot owners, even Tom admitted the problem, I don't know how many multiple lot owners voted electronically, and you had the weighting system with that, but the real problem that was identified was the multiple lot owners who cast their votes by paper, by the traditional method. And if there's a problem with multiple lot owners, if there's a problem with protection of security of the people who vote electronically, it's incumbent upon the committee to talk to that vendor or any other prospective vendors to ensure those issues could be addressed. To turn around and say, we think we may have a problem sometime in the future and therefore we should abandon electronic voting makes no sense at all, because there's no evidence that there was a problem with any of the potential problems that the election committee identified. So it almost makes sense to make sure that our current scanner, or whatever software we use, and the hard paper, the quality of the paper and the shape of the ballot and all that we use for mail-in voting, our traditional voting, works, and then we'll have a much better picture as to what's going on. But to sit there and say, well, we have a problem, we know, we identified part of the problem, we're going to wipe out electronic voting. As I said before, you disenfranchise 800 and some odd ballots, and was it 2,000 plus votes that were cast when you're trying to increase the voter pool, and you haven't identified a problem there at all. So I would suggest that the correct way to go would be to address the issue, in part what Frank picks up, but also address the problem with the paper ballots, which should solve our issue. We square off the software with the new machine, we do the paper ballots appropriately, we should be okay.
Yeah, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think, Chair Piatti actually came up with, some very good points. The card stock that was used was not card stock, it was paper that bled through, and it was a scanner software problem. The bigger issue was, not every owner got a ballot in the mail. So he also came up with a solution to that. Send a ballot to everyone. So the bleed through, fix the card stock. I'll be honest with you. I think that Tom's suggestion for going forward should be followed. The election committee obviously spent time on this, contrary to what some of my colleagues here may have said. And I think that going forward, this next election is a traditional election with the election committee looking into reinstituting online voting next time. Not this election, next election, where, listen, if you have 6 lots and you're weighted for 6, well, let's say my wife wants to vote for a different candidate than me. That HOA now didn't give you that opportunity. This is what his committee can figure out next election. I'm good with his report. Thank you.
Other discussion, Frank?
Well, that's actually 2 points. I think whether somebody elects to vote electronically, if we would go that way, or whether they elect to vote traditionally, every lot should get a ballot. No one-page scan or whatnot. It seems, and I'm just saying seems, based on what everybody said, if every lot had gotten a ballot in the last election, that we probably would have not had this problem. Okay, probably, that's a problem. But there's another issue too. And that's the reason I put the first motion forward. We're holding up another election based on cleaning up this one, and that's the change in the DRs. Okay, and I think that that needs to be a topic for the next meeting, or if somebody wants to meet before then, for 2 reasons. Number one, the DR vote is not conducted by the election committee at all. They're not involved with it. Number 2, I believe that we found out something legally that precludes electronic voting anyway in doing that, in that this vote, voting up apparently is not a vote like we consider a vote. When we consider a vote, it's like, Stuart's a candidate, Rick's a candidate, I'm a candidate, you vote, we have 3 other candidates, you vote for 3. Okay, I believe the DR change, you really don't give a vote, you give a proxy. And the proxies are all collected and taken down to Snow Hill to change the DRs. So I think that we have to figure out what we're going to do there and have a discussion on what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and how we're going to do it, or if we're going to do it based on circumstances. But I see no reason now to hold that up. And I think that that should be a discussion maybe for next meeting or sometime over the next 30 days of the board. And that was the genesis for my asking the questions to clean up the last election. Plus, look, the last election, the last election, you have volunteers doing the best job that they can, working, I think, the best way that they can. So this is not a shot at them, but the errors are just, you can't have an error in an election.
Yeah, one other comment is that, if you're talking about the notion of electronic voting being kind of a pathway to increase voter participation, then I would offer that, if that was the case, then how come we had fewer voters this year than we did last year? Just food for thought. I think the other side of it is now we have some tangible results of moving forward with online voting. Again, I go back to the idea of saying what worked in the past, what changes were introduced, and perhaps, again, based on time, that we should go back to what worked, because that's the path of, least risk in my idea, but the idea is to make sure that we have time to look at the electronic voting, because I do see benefit in that. But again, as long as we get some of these issues, and I don't want to rehash them all over again, but everybody knows what the issues are. The idea would be to charge the elections committee to say, hey, here's where we need to be. So, I don't know how much more discussion we have to have on that. I do think we do need to get some recommendation from the elections committee on how they proceed to move forward with this election, whether or not it includes electronic voting. Let's look at what they recommend and see where we go from there. But I think whatever recommendation comes back, one of our responsibilities is to go out to them and say, don't abandon electronic or online voting. Address the issues that we know about, both with the online voting and, if we're continuing, which we will continue with paper balloting, the scanning software and so on and so forth. So any final discussion? All right, Tom, rest of the committee, thank you. Next item order of business is the licensed contractor registry. Colette?
Yes, this is a topic for discussion to ask the board to consider a fee-based licensed contractor registry. Because my statement is discussion of a fee-based permit for contractors placed on a licensed contractor registry. So the background here, and I have a slideshow for this. Okay, you have that up. So CPI and ARC have been discussing the problem of work being done by contractors who present themselves as qualified to do new home dock and lift installation and tree services when in fact they're not duly licensed. And so there was a lot of discussion in the community about this being a license contractor. That is not at all what this is about. This is about a voluntary registration. So on the next slide, you see that the major concerns shared by CPI and ARC are that OPA may be unknowingly issuing permits to non-credentialed contractors who don't meet Maryland State and Worcester County licensure, and work being done in a way that does not meet prescribed and nationally recognized regional codes or standards for the trades, and homeowners being left work that needs to be corrected at their own expense because they don't qualify for the Maryland Home Improvement Commission's guarantee. So on the next slide, some background and authority for this is that the OPA DRs give authority to the ARC to approve plans for construction of an addition to structures based on requirements in the DRs and the ARC guidelines that work be done by a licensed contractor per Worcester County law. The next slide says that this includes new construction, additions and improvements, installation of docks and lifts and tree surfaces as outlined in the ARC guidelines. It has been the practice of CPI and ARC to apply the county licensing requirements when they review permit requests, but the permit application doesn't require that licensing and insurance documents be provided with the application. And so we know that the primary, on the next slide, it notes that the primary purpose of ARC is the protection of property values, protection of the aesthetic character of the community, protection of health and safety and general welfare of the members. Yet the DRs absolve the ARC of any liability and the CPI for any liability for defects and work done in accordance with any plans they approve. Thus, the burden rests with the property owner to protect themselves from unwarranted work. And on the next slide, it notes that CPI is required to operate within the applicable state agency regulations and requirements. And the proposal being discussed today is meant to support that obligation by instituting a fee-based contractor permit process. The next slide shows the various state licensing agencies and requirements. And the permit process is meant to create a registry contractors like the state who pay the $75 first year fee and $50 fee each following year to be included in a registry based on validation of their license and status. The operative word being voluntarily submit to this. The next slide states the intention, which is to create a contractor permit and licensed contractor registry, which will streamline the process for ARC and CPI in the permitting process, ensure that the permit application complies with county requirements for state licensing and bonding of work, and to make available to interested property owners a list of contractors whose license and insurance has been verified, and protect OPA by containing a disclaimer about any endorsement of the work of contractors and highlights the fact that the registry only verifies licensure and insurance status. The next slide gives more information about the what of this. That is, it's a licensed contractor registry in which contractors voluntarily submit their name and credentials and pay to be included in this registry. I will tell you that I have talked with contractors who are enthusiastic about this, would very much be in favor of paying the fee to be included in such a registry, and like the idea that there will be protections for homeowners against unwarranted substandard work for which they can get no recourse or no help from the state to pay for having it corrected. The next slide states that this is the issuance of a licensed contract, that there will be an issuance of a licensed contractor registry, which will then streamline the process for contractors applying for permits and for CPI processing permit requests. They won't have to look at credentials each time the contractor submits a permit request. And so the why of this is to make sure that we have validation of contractor credentials, that we can avoid issuance of permits for contractors who are not duly licensed. We can provide homeowners access to a list of contractors whose credentials have been verified, and that homeowners will have access to the MHIC guaranteed fund for substandard work when and if that occurs. And then the where of this is that it will reside in the CPI department. They will establish and maintain the registry for a fee to the contractor for insurance verification and verification of licensure. And it's stated on this slide, or the previous slide, I guess, the various licenses that are involved. The Maryland Registered Home Builder license, the Maryland license, and so forth. And then the when of it is on the next slide. The contractor credentials will be required prior to the issuance of the permit, which protects OPA and the homeowner. And then the next slide is the who benefits: property owners, contractors, and OPI and the CPI department. And then the last two slides have the information about the Worcester County permit application information that verifies what the Worcester County application requires. And so the idea here is to determine support from this board for the CPI department going forward with this.
Okay, this is a discussion topic, so the floor is open for discussion. Stuart?
Yeah, Colette, I know Ocean City and Worcester County have permitting. They have to be licensed to be able to do their jobs in each of these towns. I'll be honest with you, I think this creates an overreach by this board. I think that those fees, $50, $75 will be tacked on this a homeowner's bill. And what if substandard work actually occurs? Somebody that was, had one of our permits, that had one of these fees paid where they had the permission to work in our town. Homeowners are adults. You try to do your best with doing your own research for the contractor that you're trying to get typically you're going to get a referral from someone that's had work done. The three contractors that I talked to, and I can tell you who they were after the meeting, they're not in favor of this. They think that this is an overreach by the board and puts undue hardship. We're in an inflationary time. Costs of materials are already up. We're looking at putting another fee on folks. I don't think it's fair.
Stuart, this is not a requirement.
No, I
It's
mean,
voluntary.
yeah, but if we,
Someone wants to be on a registry, they can pay the fee that would.
but let me ask,
Set the costs of being on that registry.
I got
It's not a
that.
Requirement.
I got that. But what if they were on our registry as a certified, board recommended, whatever the thing is from the ARC, and substandard work occurs?
There's no.
Does that open us up for any type of legal recourse if they're on our approved list?
It's not an approved list. It's a list of of contractors whose credentials have been verified. There's no recommendation, there's no endorsement, and there is a disclaimer of responsibility for us because we're not warranting the work. We're just stating that we have verified that the credentials are in place.
When they go through the ARC to get the permit, don't they have to present that stuff?
It's not currently required by our application process. So we would need to include it in the application process. And you're correct, it would need to be presented. This is simply meant to streamline.
Okay.
And the contractors that I've talked to who understand that it's just a registry, not a license, understand that this would benefit them because their name would be made available to people looking for someone whose credentials have been verified.
Frank?
First, a couple questions. To get a county permit, Linda, does the contractor or owner have to show an Ocean Pines acceptance or permit of that project?
Caspi?
Yeah, please. Yeah, this is a discussion.
Yeah, actually, they have to get the county permit first, so they don't have, we're the second.
Okay, so because I can recognize, recall some situations in the past. When you get a county permit, if somebody comes in and does construction that violates an Ocean Pines declaration of restriction, do we have any recourse to enforce once they have the county permit?
It won't get the approval from the architectural review committee if it does not meet the guidelines or
Right.
the restrictions.
But if we're questioned and, if somebody builds a deck, it's too big, right? And the county has issued a permit and it's against the ARC guidelines, will the county tell that person to modify that deck to meet?
No.
Okay, so there's one thing. Second of all, because I've brought in contractors, what method of enforcement do we have if I contracted with Home Depot and they bring in contractors from New Jersey? Do we have any recourse as an association to stop them from doing work in Ocean Pines?
Not currently.
Okay, so so basically, I think the situation we're in is if an unauthorized contractor does unauthorized work in Ocean Pines, we have trouble enforcing that. Big time trouble. I mean, that sends us to court. Okay, with what court's going to do. Conversely, when I put in my hot tub, my contractor told me, who's a very good contractor, said, you need a zoning permit. And I said, I can't believe I need a damn zoning permit for a hot tub. And I went to the county and they said, you do need a zoning permit. And if you put in a slab without that zoning permit and we find it, we'll make you bust that slab and take it down. And we do it 3 or 4 times a year. Okay, so my point is, it's not so much an overreach. It's something that we can't enforce. And something that once it leaves our hands and goes to the county, if the county says we can do it, there's nothing we can do to stop it legally. But here is where I see value to that. I do believe that when a contractor goes for an Ocean Pines permit or a county permit, does the county check their registration as registered Maryland contractors?
county, it's requirement, as you see on the screen, it is requirement that they have a license.
So when they come with a county permit to Ocean Pines, we know that they're registered and licensed, an MGIC contractor.
If the county has checked it, yes.
Okay, so we have that. Now, what I do see forever, I mean, I see it every day on the online forum or on Nextdoor, is people asking for help. Do you know anybody that can do drywall, electrical work, plumbing work, yada, yada, right down the list. So I think we could support this situation, which is not all that different. If Ocean Pines wanted to create a registry, which could be a sheet of paper, okay? And contractors wanted to get on that sheet of paper as an electrician, right? When somebody moves in and they say, I need an electrician or I need a plumber, we could, however we communicate to them, okay, say, if you need contractors and you don't know where to go, we have a list of contractors that do work in Ocean Pines that have given us their registry information that we will give to you with a standard disclaimer. It's your job to make sure that all the permits are there. It's your job to make sure the license is current. And we could have the contractor pay to offset the cost of that. So we're not eating in our assessment. That I think is supportable. I think that's a service. I don't think that's an overreach.
That's exactly what this is proposing to do.
Who keeps the $75?
Excuse me?
Who keeps the fee?
That goes into the CPI budget as revenue. And how much revenue were you projecting?
$1,800.
$1,800.
So when John contracts out a sub, you go to contract out from our registry?
It's
Hold on, one at a time, please. Monica?
I think the point here, and again, it's not an overreach per se as a service. Quite frankly, a contractor paying $75 the first year and $50 the next, that's probably lunch for him and his buddy type of thing. So I don't even think it's a dollar and cents type of thing. It's a service. As long as we're not legally bound by that information, it's voluntary. I don't have a problem with it.
Doug?
So, all right, so I understand the concept. Just I have a strong feeling about not ever introducing any risk to the association. All right. Now I've heard the discussions and everything, but one could argue that if a name is on this registry, whether they paid for it or not, right, is that an implied endorsement? Some people will think that, right? So I'm not buying it's not an endorsement. It could be an implied endorsement. Second part of it is if they are on the registry and they do substandard work, number one, how do we enforce it and what risk do we incur? Don't have the answer to that, right? But it's a thought. Other thing, if they're not on the quote unquote registry and we deny them, right? I think the answer to that is no. The idea that for a county permit, that the county has already verified that they have the appropriate licensing at the state and county level is good enough for me, right? And I think that's where that decision point lies. Another layer of administrative overhead, I don't see the benefit in that. And quite frankly, one of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to have the board or Ocean Pines be in the business of managing personal decisions on people's own personal business on how they do things within their purview, their contractors. Ocean Pines doesn't have to, the DRs will take care of any things that are, out of bounds. But I don't want to see us have to be involved in people's personal decisions on what contractor they use for the work they want done, period. I want to stay as far away from that as possible. And yes, is this list a little benign? In the sense that it's just a list. Okay, you know what? I could probably be somewhat convinced to say, hey, guess what, folks? For zero cost, here are some contractors that we already know and we verified with the county, that have the appropriate licensing for the state and the county. That would be a nice no-cost service to the membership to say, hey, let's go out to the website. Is Joe's Barn Grill and Decking Services? Oh yeah, guess what? They are. Now, we have no authority. It's just a service that you would offer to the, to the community. That to me is benign. That doesn't carry a lot of risk because there's no, again, endorsement or policymaking associated with that. But again, I'm a firm believer in I do not want to have the board or OPA involved in personal business decisions for homeowners. Steve.
Thanks.
Hold on, Steve. He's got to get the
Thingy.
microphone again.
We good?
Go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Look, I like the idea of providing a level of consumer protection, which is, I think, what the ultimate goal
Hold on,
is.
please. Start over, please.
Okay. I like the idea of providing a level of consumer protection, which I think is what the goal of this proposal is. I think almost all of that can be achieved by CPI providing on its website, on its documents, as a flyer to hand out, the basic notion that you, the homeowner, are responsible. You should think about getting, 3 estimates for any work that's being done. You should ask and be allowed to see, their license, their bonding, their insurance arrangements, whatever. You may want to consult with others who have done work. I mean, you can give them a checklist for them to follow, for any homeowner to follow. So I think you can accomplish an awful lot just by actively providing a level of consumer education. I do have a problem with this, setting up this registry, because you have to understand the licensing process that these contractors go through includes the opportunity for when there is a conflict for redress, so that the contractor, there's actually a hearing that can be held before an administrative law judge to determine whether or not the work was appropriate, whether the billing was appropriate, whatever the issue is. And the administrative law judge renders a decision. We don't provide any of that. All we're doing is giving them a list for which the contractor pays a fee. Well, some contractors may not have any problem paying the fee, because if you're a contractor who doesn't pay the fee, you've sort of been squeezed out of the marketplace. Consumer education and quality of work are good goals, are good things to consider when you do a job, but so is cost. And if someone comes in at a lower cost, there might be a reason why they do it, why their costs are lower. And it has nothing to do with whether they're licensed or not. Furthermore, you do have people in Ocean Pines who do work for their neighbors. Now, that's between neighbors to resolve what happens, and maybe they need to make sure they get permits and whatnot from CPI. But you're sort of contracting the marketplace, and in effect, you're allowing Ocean Pines to engage in that sort of restraint of trade. You're putting the imprimatur of Ocean Pines Homeowners Association on for these contractors and excluding it for other contractors. And that's a restraint of trade. And you don't provide them with the homeowner with any redress, which is provided for in the state and county licensing. And so I think you sort of invite more potential problems than you're really trying to solve. So I would have a lot of problems with this proposal. I think focusing on consumer education is a good idea, but by the same token, cost enters into any particular equation that a homeowner engages in. And you have to realize that some are going to come in lower than others, and there may be a perfectly good reason that has nothing to do with faulty work. So I think this raises problems that we haven't really foreseen, and I would have a problem with.
So just to clarify, this is, can anybody be on a list? It's a service to streamline the process of application for the contractors. and to give the homeowners access to information about who does work in Ocean Pines that is licensed. So there is no requirement that you take somebody off this registry. And I will dispel the notion that Steve put forth that anybody who has substandard work has recourse at the state. They only have recourse at the state if the contractor was licensed by the state. The state then provides access to the guarantee fund, which will help you recoup the losses associated with having to have the work redone. So, I think there are just a lot of misconceptions about this. I tried to make it as clear as I could that it is voluntary, it's information only, disclaimer about any endorsement, disclaimer about any requirements. It's just a service. And if people have a problem with the fee, I would imagine that CPI would probably still want to do this without a fee.
I just want to echo Doug's perspective and Stephen's. I'm okay with a free list. A free list is okay. I'm not okay on charging, but a free referral list is I could get behind a free referral list.
Let me make one statement. I would refrain from using the word referral. Okay. I would just say a list
Contractor list.
of contractors that we, Ocean Pines, know have all the appropriate licensings at the state and county level.
But this comes down to be a referral list, so we should
Cannot
do it.
That's the risk averse part of me says you stay as far away from that as possible.
I agree with you.
Okay? If someone interprets it as a referral, I can't control that, but it cannot be stated as a referral. It has to be clearly stated that these are known contractors that have all the requirements at the state and county level. Thank you. Done. Move on.
All right.
And also too, in there should be a disclaimer in there that Ocean Pines
Maybe
does
go-
not,
Yeah.
does not recommend or endorse.
It addresses the issue of implied endorsement.
Correct.
That's exactly what the proposal states.
All right. Any other discussion on this? All right. Good. We'll need to at least make some sort of decision at some point. I don't guess there's and please correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't sound like there's tremendous support for this. Maybe the idea of the list with these kinds of things, maybe we can discuss it amongst ourselves at that point. It's not time consuming. It's not time sensitive right now. And I think that this discussion was helpful. And I think we should render some sort of decision and recommendation to the GM to make sure whether or not we're going to do this. And I would also ask maybe we take, if the folks from Park are not watching this meeting, I ask that you take this discussion and this, back to them for, any kind of rebuttal they want to give.
What I'm hearing being said today is that everybody present is, perhaps with the exception of Steve, is in favor of a list.
Yeah.
That's all this is asking for.
Yeah.
With no fee.
With no charge.
Be up to our GM and CPI department to determine if they would like to go forward with this without a fee.
Yeah,
So we can agree that if the list is approved, then it's up to them to decide how they want to.
So maybe to summarize this, the concept of a list, with no fee is, clearly agreed upon. We're not in operations. Let them, we've given them our opinion. It's up to them to decide how they want to handle it.
Thank you.
So basically what Doug said, what you all came at the end.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to close the discussion topic for the time being and move on to the next item of business, the second reading of amending resolution B01. Steve, where's the? Keith, bring up the portable microphone.
Mr. Microphone.
Adjourn for 5 minutes and I can try to resolve it, or pause for 5 minutes?
We're only, well,
It's up to you.
no, let's continue to do that.
We good?
Steve, you're on.
Okay. I will tell the board that that both the current motion on B01 and the one that follows on M08 are just cleanup from the first reading, which took place, I believe, last month, if memory serves. B01 as is the resolution dealing with the book of resolutions.
Steve, point of order. Just read your motion and then we'll enter into discussion.
Sorry. Okay. The motion to approve revisions to resolution B01. The purpose is to clarify the language in the resolution regarding to written legal review of resolutions and amendments to resolutions and record keeping of the legal review. The revision suggested by the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee based on the need to clarify the language from the prior revision.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion.
Yeah, I was just trying to truncate this. I apologize. The discussion that took place, I believe last month, it goes back to the third page, section 4D, which was legal review. The original proposal from the Bylaws Committee was to strike what was then the final sentence. The Bylaws and Resolutions Committee, Advisory Committee may recommend that the advice of council be obtained prior to board action on a resolution, and add in lieu thereof, when the board seeks written legal review of any resolution or amendment thereto, council must affirm review by signature prior to entry of the board approved resolution into the Board of Resolutions. The issue that came up in the last reading, the first reading of this change, was why the second section, second sentence, excuse me, the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee recommendation was taken out. And the sense from the board was just to leave that in and then add the third sentence. There's no conflict between the two sentences. They'd sort of follow in order appropriately, and that is what the committee recommended. So the language you see in red would be added. The language which previously had been struck out would stay in, and that's where we are.
Other discussion? Everybody aware of the changes that are going to be proposed? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the changes to resolution B01, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please record that the vote is unanimous. The next item on the agenda, second reading of revisions to.
We're on?
Go ahead.
Let's see.
Thank you. The motion is to approve revisions to resolution M08. Purpose and effect is to clarify the language in the resolution regarding the review and changes in the various manuals when needed, and to clarify which manuals should be reviewed by the general manager and which should be reviewed by the board. The background is this revision is suggested by the Bylaws and Resolutions Advisory Committee based on the need to distinguish which manuals are operational and should be reviewed and modified by the general manager, and which require board review and modification as determined by the board.
Is there a second? Second. Discussion.
If I may, the two changes that were made, and I'll defer when I'm done to Doug, because this is sort of his primary concern. In section, what is now 2D, manuals in effect, the point was that some of these manuals, most of these manuals are operational and really fall under the umbrella of the duties of the general manager. The one exception is the Financial Management Policy Manual. In its title is policy, and that should fall under the umbrella of review by the board. If you drop down to sub E, with the exception of the Financial Management Policy Manual, there is a provision for review by the general manager. And then the additional inclusion of two sentences: general manager report to the board on an annual basis upon completion of his review of manuals for that year, and the board shall review the Financial Management Policy Manual on an annual basis. So it just distinguishes between the different manuals we have, which are operational and which are policy.
Other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the recommended updates to resolution M08, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please record that your vote is unanimous. Next item on the agenda, motion to establish an interest rate Ounce, Monica,
I move to establish a 6% interest rate for delinquent assessment fees for the fiscal 2023-2024 budget. In effect, the establishment of an interest rate for delinquent assessment fees is required per section 12D of the Declaration of Restrictions. And background, this is an action that's required on an annual basis per our governing documents.
is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion to establish a 6% interest rate, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Record the vote is unanimous. Next item on the agenda was added when the agenda was amended, the idea of to approve the budget for 2023-2024. Monica,
I move to approve the budget for fiscal year 2023-2024, which budget was modified following the presentation to the membership at the public hearing on February 1st, 2023. Operating revenue, 14.4 million. Operating expenses, 14.4 million. Bulkhead expenses, 1.1 million. Capital expenses, general replacement, roads, drainage, new capital at 1 million. Assessment, interest rate revenue transferred to reserves, 3 million. Assessment for non-water, $883. Assessment for non-water estate, 1,300. Assessment for water, 1,500. Assessment for water estate, 2,247. Assessment for water non-bulkhead, 973. And assessment water non-bulkhead estate, 1,460. Purpose and effect, approval of the motion will allow us to use the funds as noted for operating and capital expenses associated with general operations of the association. Background, a thorough review has been completed by the GM and his team and by the Budget and Finance Committee.
is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Colette,
So I just want to point out to the membership that this is not the original budget that was proposed by the operations team and vetted by BNF. The originally proposed budget recommended some modest increases in the in amenity fees and amenity user and membership fees, and projected no subsidy for all racket sports operations, but some subsidy for aquatics. And that budget could be met with a base assessment of $902. The budget that is under consideration today takes out those increases, the revenue from those increases in amenity fees, but yields a $17 reduction in the base assessment. And so I have a question for John, and that is, how do we explain to the membership that we're able to fund a budget with no increase in amenity fees and a $17 assessment reduction? And I also have a question for Stuart. Stuart also promoted the idea of including in this budget a couples membership to make use of our aquatics facilities by couples less costly. And I want an explanation for the membership about how many couples memberships you think will be sold and how that will affect aquatics revenue and how that will affect the total subsidy for aquatics if we approve this proposal.
You'll go first?
Yeah. So let me, I didn't write down your questions, but I may ask you to repeat them, but just going back, the 902 you mentioned, it was 872. The original budget brought forward was 872. So if we're now at 883, the fact that we took out those, what you called modest increases, which I thought they were, that brings us up. So that's one of the reasons we went from 872 to 883. That's about pretty much it. What were the other questions?
And how did we get from 880, get to 883 from 902?
So I got to think. So when we were at the you're right. When we went to the 902, what I did was, what we did was we look at aquatics. As I mentioned from the very beginning, 5 months ago, when we started, whatever, want me to keep the pools open. We're going to put more salary in there, more payroll in there, capture whatever lifeguards are out there and try to be the ones to get those lifeguards. With that said, in the period of time, the 5 months and over the last couple of weeks, and as I mentioned in my GM update, we did now get 3 lifeguards. We're in the process of the 3rd one. So I'm seeing now that we have more opportunity with that. So when I was asked to relook at the budget again over the last couple of days, I took some money out of that pool of money, increased money, to try to get lifeguards. So,
And so what is our current subsidy of aquatics then?
so I think it comes out to now, help me out, it's around still in there about $30,000.
That's
Try to get lifeguards that we didn't do in the past. I felt that I've been on record as saying I thought we hit the sweet spot this last year, but we did close pools down. With that said, I've been tasked by several board members or whatever, keep those pools open. So I'm trying to increase pool of money in there, no pun, but to try to get those lifeguards. I believe now it's around 30,000.
okay. And so that includes this new couples membership as well.
So, hold on. So, okay, so you did ask me on the new couples membership. With the new couples membership, I'll make sure I don't mix this up. I believe the new couples membership between the yearly and the summer, I think the summer adjustment, if I don't mix these up, Colette, by going with the couples, we estimated that would reduce our revenue by 9,000. And for the yearly, 3,000. I know the total was 12,000. So the effect of the couples only, that's what your question is, which I believe it is. I adjusted the budget revenue down 12,000.
Okay, so I still find it hard to understand how if we are getting less revenue, how can we also?
So, and I've explained, so I took down the payroll for the aquatics. I didn't mention that. It was about 25,000. I actually have a schedule somewhere. With the police, I also made an adjustment in there based upon over the last 3 weeks, what I was able to get from the county as far as how we should organize a police department. So I had 50,000 in there for that study. I took that out based upon, I truly believe what the county just gave me will help.
Okay.
I mean, I have what you're exactly looking for. I can definitely send to you. Those are the biggest numbers. We took out, we talked about the public works. I did an adjustment in there for $10,000 for a piece of equipment that we normally rent that I don't believe we're going to need for next year. So I have this in more detail, but that's the bulk of it.
Okay.
Okay, but please, you started off with 902, the number was 872. So we went up from 872, which was my initial, to 883.
Okay, the concern that I have is that it seems that this board intervened by asking you to recalculate the budget based on specific targets, or what the amenity, specific amenity costs should be, particularly in aquatics, and also what the bottom line base assessment should be. And our governing documents require that our amenities be run so that they pay for their own operation. So I'm concerned about anything that reduces the revenue projections while we're still subsidizing our amenities. And secondly, our strategic plan, we had 1,800 some people respond to our property owners survey who told us that their priorities were public safety, infrastructure maintenance, and aesthetics. And, making budget decisions based on cost of use of our amenities does not square with that. And so I'm not happy that that's how we landed here with the dollar figure we have now.
So that's board.
And that's not on.
So you said ask Stuart, you said you want to ask Stuart a question?
I think John answered
Okay.
Stuart's question.
Stuart,
Is that right, Stuart?
Thanks, John. I think that making a new category of couples, holding our amenities at last year's fees. Folks, we're in an inflationary period where our members are getting squeezed. They're getting squeezed a dozen eggs, $5 a dozen. I mean, seriously, they're on fixed budgets. This is important. We have a surplus. We can do this. We have to be able to take care. We're all in this together. Best business practices, by not increasing it by $5 or $10, I think having a new category of just couples will increase our sales of couples memberships, as opposed to, and then we're going to also task at some point the aquatics committee to come up with other categories for grandchildren and things that are workable, that we could sell those memberships where we don't, listen, best business practices, I think John and his team have done an exemplary, done amazingly well at running our company through best business practices. I think that right now, I think this is the best business practice that we should operate under. I agree with the way his budget was done. And I don't think that increasing prices because we've benchmarked other areas is the way to go, especially when we have the ability to do this.
Yeah, and I guess my concern is, John talked to us earlier today about the headwinds associated with public safety, the cost that we're going to face with the fire department. We're being told that that's going to have to move to an all paid force. And then he also talked about the benefits package in our police services to try to be able to recruit and retain officers. Those are very high dollar items.
I understand.
I'm very concerned that we use any of our retained earnings to support our amenities when we should be, when the membership has told us that their priority for our spending is public safety.
I don't think 12,000.
Excuse me, folks. Sorry. Back to proper meeting decorum. You must be recognized by the chair before you speak. Okay? Held that up. I'm not wavering from that. So please, I'll certainly recognize everybody, but don't talk over one another. Please be recognized by the chair. And I have one question. Steve, I see your hand raised in the box there. Are you requesting to be recognized?
Yes.
Yeah, let's get Steve and then I'm going to get Frank. Okay.
That's
Thank you. Yeah, frankly, I would have preferred that this couples fee be tied back to what we are charging the aquatics committee to look at in terms of a revised and more innovative pricing procedure for our aquatics. I don't know whether it fits under best business practices or not. I'm a little concerned that we are reading more into it than we should. But what is most important to me, and I spent a little time with Doug on the phone yesterday about this, is I'm most interested in ensuring that we will go through a process a few months down the road after the audit and our books are closed from this fiscal year, and we look with more information about next fiscal year, so we can revise some of this if necessary. I probably will vote for the proposed motion. I think I will, but we need to recognize that among the different issues that have already been raised, what's abundantly clear is if over the next several years down the road, the fire department does not have funds to buy new equipment that will have to be bought because the useful life of the current equipment has expired. They've already delayed buying 2 pieces of equipment for this fiscal year. And that's just one problem that we're aware of. So these are issues that we're gonna have to face. And more to the point, they are big ticket issues and they go directly to the primary concern of our residents, which is public safety. So I'm willing to vote for this motion, but I need to know for sure that we will in fact engage in a review after the audit, after we have compiled more information of the current fiscal year to see where we are.
Frank is next.
There should be
Go ahead.
should be able to say lower hand.
Go ahead and tell me.
All right, Frank, go ahead.
Okay, so right as it stands, I will not vote for this budget. But let me give you some specific reasons why. First, John and his team have done their usual excellent job in putting together the budget. No complaints there whatsoever. Last year's assessment was $896. This year's proposed is $883. I support that item of the budget specifically. That's a reduction of $13. The board got involved and, as Stuart accurately said, it's our people are hurting. We're dealing with inflation. We have people dealing with fixed income. We should have amenity fees equal to last year. I also support that. This board in the past, during COVID, pushed the assessment date back 90 days, apparently in violation of all our DRs and whatnot, saying, hey, we're going to invoke the charter because the community's hurting. I support the amenity fees being the same as last year with this caveat. Our governing documents say that the amenities should be run break even or better. And I accept keeping the amenity fees or even reducing amenity fees for those that are running at break even or better. That leads to aquatics. Okay. And I'll give you a little history of aquatics. I will absolutely guarantee everybody that listens to this that since I moved into the community in 2013, aquatics has lost more than $1 million in net operating profit. That's $120 per house over that time period. Okay. A lot of times that loss was hidden because beach parking was subsidizing aquatics. When the beach parking was removed at the recommendation of the Budget and Finance Committee, huge losses showed up. Okay. 3 years ago, I believe John came to us with asking for approval. John came to us and said, hey guys, aquatics initial proposal is this year, they're going to lose $400,000. Folks, that's $50 in assessment per house. Okay. And as I recall at that time, what you'd expect, people's hair caught on fire, their heads exploded. And John and Kathleen Cook went about line item by line item, instituting best practices in aquatics. And that was not an easy task, and that was not a task without pain. It was very difficult to do. As a result of that, for the budget and projection for the year that will end at the end of April this year, aquatics is going to show a $20,000 profit. It is the first time in the history of the association that every amenity has shown a profit. Okay. Then we come up to this year. By the way, one other thing on this year's budget, I 100% support when we have a positive net operating variance, giving that the portion of that back to the homeowners, providing, as John said earlier, it's done after the audit is done, and we know what we have in there, and then we can discuss the percentage of that. So there's no disagreement there. Now let's get into aquatics specifically. This year, they're projecting a $100,000 loss. Okay, $100,000 loss divided by 8,452. I mean, you're basically talking $10 to $12 that if they were making a profit, could go toward an assessment reduction. Right now, if you look at all of the amenities, the only one not contributing to an assessment reduction is aquatics, and that's adding $5 to every single homeowner's assessment. Okay? Now, the idea of fairness. I'm 100% for fairness, but here's some facts for fairness. I asked John yesterday, kind of late, but how many lot owners over the course of the year use the pools? We do not have that information. When we were faced with a similar situation with golf, we could say 1,750 homeowners use this golf course in a year and about 6,700 don't. And that guided our discussions in golf toward balance. Yeah, we want to support the people that support this amenity, but the people that don't ever use this amenity should not be subsidizing a round of golf. Okay? We don't have that for aquatics. That's a missing piece of information. I also don't believe we have the total head count of the people that use the pools in the course of a year. But here's what we do have. Right now, there are 700 aquatic memberships. Okay? If you look at pool capacity, the total capacity for our pools is 800 people. So 7/8 or 88% of the pool capacity is currently used by memberships. So if you're talking about, now, people don't go every day at the same time for the whole day. But people do come and they don't spend 15 minutes at the pool and leave. They spend varying times there. So that membership base alone is eating into a significant amount of the capacity. We've talked about headwinds, okay? That $100,000 loss in not covering the basic operating cost comes from lifeguards. Some are appearing, okay, but there's a nationwide lifeguard shortage. Comes from chemical costs to keep the water clean. Chemicals aren't going to go down over the next 12 months. And comes from statutory things from the state of Maryland on minimum wages, what Maryland is not going to roll back the minimum wage. So the $100,000 subsidized loss this year saying, oh, gee, we don't want to hit people with an increase. Guess what happens next year? The cost of employment is going to go up. Okay, the cost of chemicals is going to go up. The minimum wage is going to go up. And I see absolutely no room for revenue growth except for increasing fees. So next year we'll be sitting here saying, my God, if we're going to increase aquatics to where it has to be to covering costs, it's going to be, it's going to be huge. Yeah, it's going to be huge. It's going to be what we should have done this year, plus what we have to do next year. Or we're going to go back to the perennial annual loss of the structural deficit, which is wrong. And when you talk about being fair, I want people to consider this. Not only don't we know how many homeowners, lot owners in this community use it, but here's what I can tell you as a fact. There are 503 homes in the park. They pay a separate fee to use an indoor pool year round. This is an outright $5 a year penalty on them because they don't have to come to the pools. So right there, one section of Ocean Pines, okay, obliviates the membership. So I think what we're doing is actually the reverse of what was happening in golf. I have no idea how many homeowners use the pools each year, but I feel pretty confident it's less than half. And what we're doing then is subsidizing on the backs of half the community the cost of operation of the pool. And I think that is dead wrong. And I think it moves us back to where we were of subsidizing an annual loss in the assessment on a continuing basis rather than demanding an assessment reduction by living with our governing documents, which is break even or better. So I'm fine with the budget as it is with one exception. I think aquatics memberships have to be increased to cover the operating cost. Doesn't have to show a profit, but I want it to show zero. But
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I would say not only the memberships, but the daily use fees need to cover the cost of aquatic.
Yeah.
And I would support a budget that includes that. I see that as not only taking out of the pockets of the non-users of the pool, but it's also taking money away from public safety, which is our primary concern.
All right, I have a couple of comments. One is that, and I don't want to say this in a disparaging manner, but people in Ocean Pines in the 7 years I've been on the budget, there's some things that really they're important to them. Clearly, one of them is the assessment. Let's face it, a lot of time, energy, conversation has been spent on the assessment. It's something that people care about. Now, whether or not they know how the assessment affects the rest of the budget, I can't answer that question, but I know some people are very passionate about the assessment, all right? I'm going to take a guess that a good portion of the Ocean Pines Association does not look at the net operating profits and or losses of a particular amenity and put a lot of emphasis on it. That's not to say that they shouldn't. I'm just saying that doesn't come to top of mind. That's not part of their sphere of influence that allows them to say, hey, I want to do the following and so on and so forth. So while I hear you and I would be hypocritical if I said we shouldn't really kind of tie ourselves back to the item in the resolutions that say the amenities need to be run in a business-like manner, okay? One could argue that back when the beach parking would subsidize the aquatics and you moved money from one category to another to make that number look good, is that the intent? Is that good? Are we running it in a business-like manner? No, we're not. The other thing that comes to mind is that we've been very lucky over the past couple of years with regard to weather. All right, weather affects a lot of these amenities, okay? The idea that there is no guarantee that the revenue projection whether it's conservative, whether it's aggressive, I like to believe it's somewhat conservative, will always pan out. We could lose 1, 2, 3 weekends that would affect 5 pools, the golf course, potentially the yacht club for, on a weekend. So all of that factors into it. Remember, folks, we're looking at something that we are taking what I believe is very strong, based on John and his team's work, an educated guess on predicting what will happen between 12 and 18 months from now. I mean, that's really what a budget is. All right. Now, one other thing, and I want to make sure, because again, this is for the public. People use the word lost. We lost money. Okay. Remember, all we're looking at is the variance between the budget and actuals. Okay. If you calculate that as a loss or classify that as a loss, it's not a loss. It's a differentiation between the predicted amount of revenue and the actual amount of revenue. So I don't want people to realize that, oh, well, we just lost all this money. No, we didn't. At the end of the day, yes, I would absolutely agree that we have to run the amenities in a business-like manner. However, at the end of the day, you're looking at all these different categories, and what was the bottom line? The 883, or that assessment, allowed us to not be in the red. All right. And we did a surplus. Look at it kind of at a very macro level. The other thing that kind of really pushed me is it goes back to the concept of there's this, and John did a very good job of describing this earlier, but there's this concept of Ocean Pines has millions in the bank. What are they doing with it? Why are you keeping my money? Okay. I think if you go back to what John said earlier, you understand that, you have to be able to plan for some of the unknowns and so on and so forth. And I think that the idea of, I know there's unintended consequences of not meeting that idea of running it at a business-like manner. But I think more importantly, if you just take that myopic approach, then you're ignoring some of the things that are very sort of close to the heart for a lot of people in Ocean Pines. Meaning, why should I have to spend extra for this? We're in an inflationary period. If we can get a budget that'll get us to a reasonable point of view, we can't ignore the fact that, some people may go, what, 5, 10, 20 bucks, I don't care. There's other people to go, I'm really glad, I was right on that threshold. And now that it's not going to go up 20 bucks, I may go ahead and buy that particular amenity. All right. So we're taking a little bit of the human factor out of it. So I believe that, with the increase in costs, supply chain issues, and all the other things that would affect the financial aspects of Ocean Pines, I think the idea of keeping the amenities the same, is a really, really important thing. And I believe we've got that with the assessments, what's going to be $13 less than last year. And here we are still talking the fact that we can provide some level of assessment, and the budget is saying we should finish in the black. Will every single entity, every part of that budget finish in the black? But no, it's not the case. And it's never the case, just in case you run into some of those unintended consequences of, again, bad weather. What happens to the revenue projections, and I guess at least for the amenities, they go out the window. But that's the best you can do with regard to, a budget that is a target prediction of what you believe will happen in the next 12 to 18 months. I'm very comfortable with the budget. I hear and respect the other opinions, but the idea is I think we're in a very good spot right now. We've met not only the financial aspect of it, but the human aspect of it. And I'm all for moving forward with approving the budget. Other discussion?
One more.
Rick?
And through all the discussions with all the colleagues here is what we have seen is there's a lot of unknowns that are out there. Weather. We also have to look down the road too, that we are going to have some more replacements. As an example, Beach Club, that's going to be something that we're going to have to put up on our radar. But one of the things that we are, as we all know, are in an unprecedented time. Stuart mentioned about inflation, where we're at inflation, 7-8%. There's a lot of memberships that I have talked to that are on a fixed income, and their income is not adjusting to the rate of inflation. It's very, very difficult for them. They've had to cut back on a lot of their purchases. Several that I have spoken with regarding to amenities, having their children and grandchildren coming down to go to the pools and enjoy some of our facilities that we have here, and aren't or will not be able to do that because the increased costs. That's how tight things have become with a lot of our association memberships here. So we have to really take that into account too as well, and keeping the assessments flat and keeping our amenities flat the way they are during this unprecedented time. I do hope and it trends down, but where we're at right now, the cost of living is unbelievable, and it is affecting individuals. I'll sit there and I'll walk through the grocery store here in Ocean Pines, and people stop me and talk about that. What's going to go on with the assessment? What's going on with the amenities? I can't afford if there's any more increases right now. I can't afford when my kids and my grandchildren come down, if they're going to be able to go to the pools because the assessment costs are going to go up, or the amenities costs that are going to go up. So with where we're at and how John and his team have reduced the assessment down to where it's at now and keeping it flat, I think this is the right thing to do in taking care of our association members at this particular time. So I will support this budget moving forward.
Right.
The discussion is slightly off track. I support the 883 number, and I support reducing or keeping the amenity fees the same for every single amenity that's showing a net operating profit. But I'm opposed to subsidizing aquatics because we have tangible evidence that it's penalizing as many people as it's helping. You can't deny there's 503 people in the park. They're going to get hit with $5 assessment. They don't need it. They have their own indoor-outdoor pool that's exclusively theirs. You can't deny that not everybody in Ocean Pines uses our aquatics. Every single person that doesn't use it's getting saddled with $5 extra, which is counterproductive to what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is to reduce the impact of the inflation and reduce the impact of a fixed by keeping the assessment the same. I'm perfectly fine with it. Just raise the aquatics fees to cover the net operating cost and keep everything else. And to the extent of risk, yeah, the whole budget's a risk, but I'll tell you what, if we have that bad weather, where it's going to hit people hardest is in aquatics, because we're saying right now, if everything goes as planned, we're going to lose $100,000. What happens if things don't go as planned? Even a bigger tax on the people that don't use the aquatics. That's the issue, not keeping the assessment at 883. It's having the people that use it, okay, pay for the basic cost of operation, because we can't reduce that cost. If we can, I don't know where it's going to come from based on the work that's been done over the last 3 years. It only has to come from income growth. And already we know 88% of the capacity to pool is used up by the memberships that are projected in the budget that exist. That's the issue.
Point taken. Let me also add a little bit of a retort is that we've been dealing with the issue of subsidizing for the past 50 years. Okay. I've heard so many arguments. People say, well, I don't use the golf course. Why is that assessment? Or I don't use the racket sports center. We've got it built in that as a community, we subsidize both the things we use and the things we don't use. And that's not going to ever go away. All right. Nobody's going to, and that's why we never, what was it, about 6 years ago, we talked about trying to do an a la carte. In other words, you did an assessment for X and then, you just add it all to a la carte and that would be your final. And it would, the administrative overhead was just unbearable. The calculating of revenue would be, unconscionable and so on and so forth. So the idea of somebody being able or requiring or having to subsidize another part of an amenity that they don't use is part and parcel of the way Ocean Pines has been run for a very, very long time. And like I said, that's not going to change.
Well, one contradict. We've cured all of that, Doug, except in aquatics. And every single homeowner that signs to buy a house in here subsidizes every single amenity through the funding of the reserve accounts. What we don't sign up to do is fund somebody's hot dog, somebody's golf game, somebody's swimming by not covering the net operating cost. And this is a very correctable problem. The very correctable problem is just increase the cost. Same risks apply. By the way, first guy, we increase the cost, people may not use the pool, okay? But it may not make any difference. It may not make any difference. But this is a sure penalty that I'm opposed to putting on the backs of the people that we're trying to help.
So one more comment. Your point is taken. And I would also offer that, if you increase the price, it may dissuade people from using it.
Absolutely.
In case of revenue loss. And if you keep the price the same, it may, people may decide, hey, they were on that threshold, they want to do that. So, there's, again, it's a coin toss at that point, But the idea here is that I think more people will react and kind of feel that they've got some value out of a conscious decision to keep the cost the same this year. That's my opinion. All right,
Doug, just one final comment. You talk about the coin toss. The coin toss is there, but our governing documents give us the guidance that we need to use in making these decisions. The membership may not look at the operating costs. That's our job to do. And it's our job to make decisions that are consistent with what the guidance given and the mandates given in our governing documents. And that is that we hold the amenities to operating, to funding themselves. And I agree with Frank that the fairness factor, at least in terms of let's hold to our governing documents, is what should prevail when we're dealing with the coin toss.
All right. Unless there's any other comments, questions, I'll call the question. I'm sorry, you're out of order. You're out of order. Okay. The discussion is at the board level, not at the public level. Since there's no other questions, I'll call the question. Those in favor of approving the budget for FY 23-24 based on the information that was presented in the motion form, please say aye. Aye. All right. Those opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The motion passes 5-2.
You voted for?
Yes, Steve voted for it.
Voted.
All right. Next item on the agenda. Appointments. I'll entertain a motion to accept John Lynch, first term Strategic Planning Committee, and John Maziuk, second term Environmental and Natural Assets Committee.
With the motion.
So moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on either one of the candidates? None, I'll call the question. All those in favor of appointing John Lynch, first term Strategic Planning Committee, and John Maziuk, second term Environmental and Natural Assets Committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please record the vote as unanimous. Entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.